What if I told you that some of the vaccines your vet recommends every single year, your dog might not actually need? Not one, not two, sometimes several of them. That's a hard thing to hear, especially when everything about pet care teaches us to trust the system, follow the schedule, and never question the routine. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. This isn't about blaming your vet. Most of them truly care. They're not trying to harm your dog. They're following a system that was built decades ago, one that hasn't fully caught up with what we now understand about immunity, risk, and individualized care. I used to trust every yearly reminder without hesitation, until I started asking one simple question. Why? Why this vaccine? Why every year? Why for my dog specifically? And the more I looked for answers, the more I realized something surprising. Many decisions weren't based on my dog's real lifestyle, but on a one-size-fits-all protocol. Here's the truth. Loving your dog doesn't mean doing everything automatically. It means being present, being aware, and sometimes being willing to pause and question what you've always been told. So before your next appointment, don't just follow the reminder card. Ask questions. Understand what's going into your dog's body. Because real care doesn't start with blind trust, it starts with curiosity. Here's a truth that surprises a lot of dog owners. Many dogs today are receiving far more vaccines than their immune systems actually need. In some clinics, it's not unusual for a dog to get 6, 7, even 9 different vaccines in a single year. On the surface, it feels responsible. It feels like you're doing everything possible to protect your dog. But when you step back and look at the science, the picture becomes more complicated. A dog's immune system doesn't require constant stimulation to stay strong. In fact, once proper immunity is built, especially for core diseases, it can last for years, sometimes much longer than the annual schedule suggests. And here's something even more important to understand. A vaccine is not a guarantee of protection. It's a tool that helps the body prepare, but the outcome still depends on how your dog's immune system responds. Not every dog responds the same way, and more vaccines don't automatically mean better protection. In some cases, repeated and unnecessary vaccinations can place extra stress on the immune system, increasing the risk of reactions or long-term imbalances. And I had to confront this myself, and it wasn't easy to accept. Because like most owners, I believed that doing more meant caring more. But over time, I realized something that completely changed my perspective. More shots doesn't mean more love. Sometimes, it means more risk. Real care is not about doing everything. It's about doing what actually matters. It's about understanding your dog as an individual, not just following a checklist. So instead of asking, what else should I add? Maybe the better question is, what does my dog truly need? Because taking good care of your dog isn't about doing more. It's about doing it right. Before we go any further, it's important to understand one key idea that changes everything. Not all vaccines are created equal. In veterinary medicine, vaccines are generally divided into 2 categories, core and non-core. Core vaccines are considered essential for every dog, no matter where they live or how they spend their time. These include diseases like distemper, parvovirus, and rabies, serious, often fatal illnesses where the vaccines are highly effective and absolutely worth it. These are the foundations of protection, and skipping them can put your dog at real risk. Non-core vaccines, on the other hand, are different. They are not meant for every dog. They are situational, based on your dog's lifestyle, environment, and level of exposure. A dog that spends time hiking through forests, swimming in lakes, or interacting with many unfamiliar dogs may have very different needs compared to a dog that lives in an apartment, walks on clean city sidewalks, and has limited contact with other animals. Here's where things start to go wrong. In many cases, non-core vaccines are being treated like core ones, recommended routinely, given automatically, and repeated every year without much thought. That one-size-fits-all approach ignores the most important factor. Your dog is an individual. This is something that really changed how I see pet care. Not every dog lives the same life. So why are we treating them the same? A farm dog and a city dog do not face the same risks, and their healthcare shouldn't look identical. So instead of following a generic schedule, start thinking in terms of personalization. Look at your dog's daily environment, their habits, and their real exposure risks. Because smart care isn't about doing what everyone else does. It's about doing what makes sense for your dog. So why are so many dogs being over-vaccinated in the first place? The answer isn't as simple as blaming one person or one decision. It's a combination of factors that have quietly shaped the system over time. First, there's outdated knowledge. Many veterinarians were trained years, even decades ago, when annual vaccination protocols were the standard. Science has evolved since then, but habits are hard to break, and not every clinic updates its approach as quickly as the research does. It's not about bad intentions. It's about old routines continuing in a modern world. Second, there's the business side of things. Veterinary clinics, like any other service, need to stay financially sustainable. And annual vaccine visits create consistent appointments, predictable income, and repeat clients. Again, this doesn't mean vets are acting unethically, but it does mean the system naturally leans toward recommending more, not less. And then there's the most powerful factor of all, fear. All it takes is one reported outbreak, maybe a handful of cases in a single city, and suddenly the message spreads everywhere. Clinics start pushing that specific vaccine, owners panic, and within days, thousands of dogs are being vaccinated for a risk that may be extremely low in their actual environment. I've seen stories where just a few confirmed cases triggered mass vaccination campaigns across entire regions. That's not always careful, individualized medicine. That's fear in motion. This is where my perspective really shifted. Fear is one of the most powerful marketing tools in the world, especially when it comes to our pets. Because when it's about something we love, we don't want to take chances. We say yes, just in case. But here's the problem. Decisions made in fear are rarely balanced. So instead of reacting emotionally, take a step back and look at the real risk. What is your dog actually exposed to? What is the likelihood of infection in your specific area? Good care isn't about eliminating every possible risk. It's about understanding which risks truly matter. Let's talk about the Lyme disease vaccine, because on the surface it sounds like an obvious yes. Lyme disease is real, ticks are everywhere, and no owner wants to risk their dog getting sick. But when you look a little deeper, the reality becomes much more complicated. And the Lyme vaccine is only about 60% effective, and that's under ideal conditions, when your dog has never been exposed before. That means even if you vaccinate every single year, there's still a significant chance it won't fully protect your dog. And because it's a bacterial vaccine, it requires annual boosters, which means repeated stimulation of your dog's immune system over time. But here's the part that really changed how I see it. Lyme disease is just one of many tick-borne illnesses. There are dozens out there, and this vaccine only targets one. So even in a best-case scenario, you're not actually solving the bigger issue. You're not eliminating the risk of ticks. You're just addressing a small piece of it. You're not solving the problem. You're patching one tiny part of it. That realization hit me hard. Because if something only works half the time, would you trust it for someone you love? Especially when it comes with potential side effects like joint inflammation and immune reactions that some dogs experience. So instead of relying heavily on a yearly shot, a smarter approach is to focus on prevention and awareness. Check your dog for ticks after every walk, especially in high-risk areas like tall grass or wooded trails. Stay consistent with routine blood tests. If you live in a region where Lyme is common, early detection makes a huge difference, and Lyme disease is treatable with antibiotics when caught early. You can also use safe repellents and be mindful of where your dog explores. At the end of the day, protection isn't just about what you inject. It's about how aware you are. And sometimes, being present and proactive does far more for your dog than a vaccine ever could. Now let's talk about the leptospirosis vaccine, often called lepto. This is one I feel a lot of owners say yes to without ever really understanding the full picture. On paper, lepto sounds serious, and it can be. It's a bacterial infection that can affect the liver and kidneys, usually spread through contaminated water or the urine of wild animals. Naturally, that sounds like something you'd want to prevent at all costs. But when you look closer, there are a few major concerns that are hard to ignore. First, the vaccine doesn't cover all strains. In fact, there are dozens of different strains of leptospirosis in the environment, and the vaccine only protects against a small handful. That means even if your dog is vaccinated, they can still get infected by other strains. So the protection is incomplete from the start. On top of that, the lepto vaccine is known for having a relatively higher rate of side effects compared to many other dog vaccines. Things like allergic reactions, vomiting, lethargy, and facial swelling. And like other bacterial vaccines, it needs to be given every year, which means repeating that risk again and again. But what really opened my eyes was seeing how fear can drive decisions. There was a case where just 4 confirmed infections in one city triggered a massive response. Within days, clinics were vaccinating thousands of dogs across entire regions. Owners were lining up, worried and unsure, doing what they thought was safest. But when you step back, you have to ask, was that a measured response or something else entirely? And this wasn't medicine. It was panic in motion. That moment made me rethink everything, because not every dog is actually at risk. Does your dog regularly drink from puddles, swim in lakes, or roam in areas with wildlife? Or do they live in a clean home, walk on paved streets, and have limited exposure to those environments? That difference matters more than most people realize. So before automatically agreeing to this vaccine, take a moment to look at your dog's real lifestyle. If the risk factors aren't there, the vaccine may not be necessary. Smart care starts with understanding context, not reacting to fear, but responding to reality. Now let's look at the canine influenza vaccine, commonly known as dog flu. This is one that often gets recommended if your dog goes to boarding, daycare, or social environments, and at first glance, it seems completely reasonable. After all, outbreaks do happen, and some dogs can get seriously sick. But when you dig deeper into how this virus works, the situation becomes far less straightforward. The biggest issue is that the virus is constantly changing. Just like human flu, there are different strains, and the vaccine is designed to target only a limited number of them. That means every year, it's essentially a prediction, an educated guess about which strains might be circulating. Sometimes that guess is accurate, but other times, it completely misses the mark. And when that happens, the vaccine offers little to no real protection. It's a guessing game, and your dog is the one taking the risk. Another important point is that dog flu outbreaks tend to be very localized. They don't usually spread evenly across entire countries, and instead, they appear in specific places: one kennel, one event, one city, and then fade out. For the average dog who isn't constantly traveling or exposed to high-density dog populations, the actual risk of encountering the virus in a meaningful way is often quite low. What really shifted my perspective was realizing that piling on more and more vaccines every year doesn't necessarily make a dog healthier. In fact, it can sometimes do the opposite by placing unnecessary stress on the immune system. A strong immune system is better than a stack of yearly shots, because ultimately, it's your dog's natural defenses that determine how well they handle exposure, not just what's been injected. So instead of relying solely on vaccination, focus on what actually reduces risk in a practical way. Choose boarding facilities or daycare centers that prioritize cleanliness, proper ventilation, and health screening. Pay attention to your dog's overall well-being. High-quality nutrition, clean water, regular rest, and low stress all play a huge role in immune strength. Because in the long run, building a resilient, healthy dog does far more than chasing protection through uncertain predictions. Finally, let's talk about the canine coronavirus vaccine, one of the most overlooked and, honestly, misunderstood vaccines on the list. First, it's important to clarify that this is not the same as COVID-19. It's a completely different virus that affects a dog's digestive system, usually causing mild symptoms like diarrhea or vomiting. In most healthy dogs, especially those living in clean environments with proper care, it's rarely serious and often resolves on its own within a few days. That alone raises an important question. Why is this vaccine still being given so routinely? The answer lies in how it's delivered. In many cases, the coronavirus vaccine isn't offered as a standalone shot. It's quietly included in combination vaccines, those multi-letter injections that bundle several diseases into a single syringe. And here's the problem. Most owners don't even know their dog got this shot. They assume they're agreeing to the standard essentials without realizing there may be extra non-essential components included. That realization was a turning point for me. Because if we're being honest, you wouldn't accept hidden ingredients in your dog's food without checking the label. So why accept them in vaccines? What goes into your dog's body matters just as much, if not more. This doesn't mean combination vaccines are always bad, but it does mean you should be aware of what's inside them. Not every disease included is equally dangerous or equally relevant to your dog's life. And when it comes to something like canine coronavirus, where the illness is typically mild and manageable, the benefit of vaccination becomes much less clear. So here's a simple but powerful habit to adopt. Always ask questions. Ask your vet to list every disease included in the vaccine. Ask why each one is necessary for your specific dog. Take a moment to read the label, count the components, and understand what you're agreeing to. Because real care isn't just about saying yes, it's about knowing exactly what you're saying yes to. So if the goal isn't to keep adding more vaccines year after year, what's the smarter alternative? This is where something called a titer test becomes incredibly valuable. A titer test is a simple blood test that measures the level of antibodies already present in your dog's system for specific diseases like distemper or parvovirus. In other words, instead of guessing whether your dog needs another shot, you're actually checking their current level of protection. Think of antibodies as your dog's internal defense system, like trained soldiers ready to respond if a threat appears. If that system is already strong and well prepared, adding more vaccines may not provide any additional benefit. In fact, it could be unnecessary. And that's the perspective that really shifted things for me. Why add more soldiers when the army is already strong? What makes titer testing so powerful is that it turns a routine into a decision. Instead of automatically following a yearly schedule, you're making a choice based on real data, on what your dog actually needs, not what's assumed. And in many cases, dogs maintain protective antibody levels for years after their initial core vaccinations. So before agreeing to another booster, consider asking your vet about a titer test first. It's a small step, but it can prevent unnecessary injections and give you peace of mind. Because thoughtful care isn't about doing more. It's about knowing when enough is already enough. So what does a truly smart vaccination schedule actually look like? It's simpler and more intentional than most people think. For puppies, the foundation usually includes core vaccines like distemper and parvovirus, given in a series starting around 8 weeks, repeated at 12 weeks, and followed by a booster at about 1 year of age. After that, many dogs don't need constant yearly boosters if their immunity is already strong. Rabies, of course, is a legal requirement in many places, but even then, it's typically administered once and then repeated every 3 years, not annually. The key insight here is this. Spacing vaccines is not slower care. It's smarter care. Giving multiple vaccines all at once, or repeating them too frequently, can place unnecessary stress on your dog's immune system. Just because something can be done more often doesn't mean it should be. What really makes a schedule smart is personalization. No two dogs live the same life, so their health care shouldn't look identical. A dog that spends most of its time indoors in a clean, urban environment may not need the same protection as a dog that roams outdoors, interacts with wildlife, or travels frequently. So instead of following a fixed, one-size-fits-all timeline, work with your vet to create a plan that fits your dog's actual lifestyle. Avoid stacking multiple vaccines into a single visit when possible, and give your dog's body time to respond properly. Because in the end, better care isn't about speed or quantity, it's about precision. At the end of the day, everything comes down to one simple truth. Every decision you make has an impact on your dog's life. Every vaccine, every choice, every moment where you say yes or no, it all shapes their health, their comfort, and their future. This isn't about fear, and it's not about rejecting veterinary care. It's about being intentional. It's about understanding that your dog depends on you to make decisions they can't make for themselves. And this is the part that matters most to me. Your dog doesn't need a perfect owner. They don't need someone who gets everything right all the time. What they truly need is someone who is willing to question, to learn, and to protect them, even when it's uncomfortable. Because real love isn't passive. It doesn't just follow routines. It pays attention, it adapts, and it stands up when something doesn't feel right. Your dog trusts you completely. They don't second-guess your choices. They don't research or compare options. They simply believe that you're doing what's best for them. And that kind of trust is powerful. It's also a responsibility. So if this made you think differently, I'd love to hear your experience. Have you ever questioned a vaccine before? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if you know another dog owner who needs to hear this, send this to them. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because the more we learn, the better we can care for the ones who rely on us every single day.